Welcome back to this week's episode of Green Enterprise, a partnership between my company, Digital Venture Partners, and Black Enterprise, where every week I have a conversation with a prominent Black cannabis executive that I think is representing our culture the right way and creating inroads for more entrepreneurs who look like ourselves to come into the space and make meaningful progress. This week with me, I have Onell Crawford. He's a partner and co-founder in Aligned Ventures. And this is the first time we're actually having a conversation with an entrepreneur who's actually based in Canada. So I'm excited to talk about just the differences in the market and just the process of the legalization in cannabis in each company. So Onell, it's a pleasure to have you on today.
Likewise, Andrew, I really appreciate you having me here. Appreciate that.
Hey, yeah, man, we had a conversation just a day or so ago, and I was really interested in your perspective. I think your experience is truly unique in cannabis as a Black executive, as a Black founder, and operating outside of the United States, not only in your residence, but just in emerging markets around the world. But before we hop into that, I would love for you to give our viewers a background on your professional career in cannabis, your professional career before you hopped into cannabis. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, so in back in 2008, I actually got into underwriting for one of the largest banks on the insurance side here in Canada called RBC. Um, I moved out of there and started working into the entertainment, doing a lot of creative work for entertainers that many of us know, which led me into helping a company that's pretty well established in California, and I help them with their creatives and kind of developing their company and assets, things like that. And then I moved into cannabis and technology with the company that I currently work with from 9 to 5 and just focusing on tech and providing high level, high standards, premium products to the market.
Okay, great. I know during our conversation before we hopped on, you were telling me just about the wealth of expertise you've had, just kind of whether that's finance, whether that's data, whether that's graphics and creativity. Uh, what parts of those industries were you able to bring with you into the space that have you well equipped?
Yeah, that's a good question. I also, and I guess I lightly skipped over it. I actually graduated as a paralegal here in Canada too. So I had a bit of a background coming into it from a legal perspective, and then coupled with creative. So I think both of those kind of helped me early on working with, that startup company out in California, being able to understand compliance and legal regulations and things like that. And then from a creative standpoint, being able to align their company and their creatives and kind of get their assets set up for merch and just growing their company.
Okay,
So I
and
think
this
my
is kind of
creative side really helped. Yeah.
okay, cool. So this is kind of outside of the talking points that I had prepared, but just a personal question I have. What have you identified as the differences in the markets between Canada and the United States in cannabis? I know that Canada is federally legal, but just kind of what's the difference of the customer demographic, what they look for in a brand and things such as that?
Man, that's a really good question. I think I think that answer is very broad in respect to Canada being federally legal is fairly new in the sector of cannabis that I work in, which is vape hardware and concentrates, oils, things like that. It's also fairly new. Um, Having worked in the California market for the last 4 years, I got a chance to kind of see the future when it comes to how things are being done in Canada. And I'm watching some of those trends start to pop up and emerge here in Canada. So, I think the market in Canada is still kind of learning and still understanding. A lot of people throw around that word kind of curious. I think some of those people that were, kind of totally against it or curious are starting to come in and shape what that's going to look like in the future. But at the moment, I think it's a little early to say. I do see vape hardware as an area of interest, and I see that taking off and growing, fairly strongly. But yeah, and as far as the differences, I mean, Canada, the way that it operates is we have a distribution for each province. Whereas in America, it's kind of like to each his own in each state, so to speak. So there are some nuances, some slight differences. Packaging, for example, here in Canada, we got to be very careful with not only how we package, but how we represent the product. Like, can't be celebrity led, for example. Whereas out in California, it's very, very different when it comes to brand and brand identity and things like that, being able to differentiate drastically in the market when it comes to your products.
Okay, great. And then another, just to kind of compound that question, when Canada legalized federally, it was a lot of money, a lot of major corporations popped up, and a lot of them ran into issues. We don't have to name them specifically, but a lot of them, raised over $1 billion and are now insolvent or not even around anymore. What do you think can be learned from how those companies launched once Canada legalized federally?
Yeah, I think there's nothing special about cannabis when it comes to strategically building a company, right? I think it's always due diligence, always take your time, have an understanding, tread carefully and lightly. There's always risks, especially in a new industry, or an industry that's starting to become regulated globally. I think there was a lot of hype early on, and a lot of people wanted to get in, and understandably so. But I think I think there was a lot of overvaluations, just a very inflated point of view in how they were going to do it. I think as we watch the industry mature, we're starting to see an intersection of two worlds. One world where there's an extreme knowledge on the flower itself, on the plant itself, and then you have on the complete opposite end very knowledgeable people on corporate structures and how to operate a business. And what we're seeing is that kind of meeting of both worlds. So as the industry matures, we're watching a lot of M&As. We saw a lot of M&As happen during a pandemic, right? So that in itself can kind of tell you this industry is growing. It's growing quickly. And it's gonna level off at a point where a lot of these players in the market are gonna find themselves either acquired or unable to sustain a business. But I think it's due diligence, and I think what we can learn from it is take your time, build your company, focus on the people that are helping you build your company, so that you can have a strong culture and a strong understanding of what you're doing in that company, and just tread lightly and with purpose.
Okay, and before we hop into your work with your company Aligned and your partnership with George Powdrill, who I had the pleasure of meeting last week, also, I'm going to ask you a question that I get asked often, right? From just young Black or minority entrepreneurs, or just people in general who say, Onell, how do I get into the cannabis space? I want to get a license. I want to start a company. What advice do you give to that early stage entrepreneur who's trying to find their way into the space?
That's a good question. I think there's a bunch of different types of entrepreneurs that need to get in the space, and what I mean by that is some have more support than others. I think regardless of what the background is of that particular entrepreneur trying to get into the space, I think what's important is that you align yourself with the right crowd, the right people, the right mentors to give you a pathway to success, being able to point to some of the blind spots that we saw, back to your point around some of kind of the pitfalls early on in the development of this industry. I think, aligning yourself with people that understand what they're doing, come from diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, everyone has something to offer. And yeah, just growing it in that fashion.
Okay, cool. And then next I want to talk about Aligned Ventures, which is a new company that you started yourself. Give me an idea of kind of what was the thinking behind that, and what's the goal of the company, and what made you guys bring it together?
Yeah, the goal was really to help founders that have been historically marginalized, kind of find their way. One of the barriers in this industry in particular has been financial resource, access to financial instruments to be able to grow and to scale your business. Ownership, that's one of the things that have been lacking. I think as a people, money has never really been a problem to get, right? We come through money, we blow through money. Ownership has been something more of a struggle. And I think, with that in mind, and wanting to see more founders get into the space, that have historically been oppressed or marginalized, they need support systems. They need people to not only guide them from a mentorship standpoint, but they need access to those financial instruments to scale their business. And we felt like we had enough resources combined to be able to help them, through studios, excuse me, through the studios that we have access to, some of the brightest, strongest minds in technology, for example, as well as some very strong connections in the financial world. So that kind of birthed, creating a company that would help to support financially some of these entrepreneurs coming into space.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's instrumental. You can only go as far as your company can be financed to take you, right? But
Exactly.
just to kind of expound on that, the materials and thought processes that you have to have when you're seeking capital. A lot of times, like my company, DVP, we've made a few investments, and, people come to us and they want capital, but they don't really have the materials. They don't have a business plan. They don't have a pro forma. Like, what are some of the things that you have to make sure you have in place so an investor can take you seriously and you don't burn that relationship?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a few things that definitely need to be in place before getting in front of an investor. How much skin do you have in the game is one of the first things that investors want to look at, right? You're looking to borrow my money, but you haven't even contributed as much as you're asking for. So that's always something investors will look for. If in fact you do have financial investments within your own endeavors, what is your runway, pre-investment, right? Like, how much, if you don't get this money, how much money do you have to sustain your business? So just due diligence with your finances. What does your team look like, right? We all know, and I'm an advocate for teamwork and collaborativeness. So what does your team look like? Are you trying to do this all by yourself as a one-man show? And that's obviously respective to the type of business you're operating. Some businesses need a heavier C-suite, heavier management team, and some, they can operate a little more lean. But I think those are a few things that any investor would want to see. They definitely want to know a rate of return. They want to see their money. They want to understand, what is the exit? What is the long-term goals? When going in front of anyone for money. It's just like someone coming to you and asking you, hey, can I borrow $10? Yeah, you can. When am I going to get my 20 back? Right. So just using some small, lunch food denomination money. But yeah, same principles apply. When do I get my money back? How? What's the long-term goals? And if it's padded well enough, I mean, you might find yourself in a great position to get an investor that can see you through, right, to IPO.
Okay, and then just to drill a little bit deeper into the world that we exist in, which is cannabis, what's the difference in finding capital cannabis versus just a traditional investor? It's a lot more difficult for us in cannabis.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's also a great question. I think seeing as though it's a new industry, there are a lot of people that just don't have a lot of knowledge, a lot of security in providing the money that's needed or requested in this space. So having an investor that understands the nature of the business, it's just like healthcare. If you're in healthcare, you want an investor that understands healthcare. If you're in sports and entertainment, likewise, right? So I think it's just a matter of finding a group of investors like those at Aligned Ventures that understand what it takes to be a partner, right? And that's another thing that we gotta kind of put a focus on in this industry. We shouldn't be looking for investors as much as we're looking for partnerships, right? It's a marriage, right? When you get in bed with an investor, so to speak, it's a long-term relationship, so to speak. So you want to make sure that relationship is aligned. Your investor believes in your company, believes in the product, and that way they can provide some of their resources that they've amassed over the years to help grow your business as well. But I think it's just a matter of, we'll get there. We're just in a period of a lot of growth. There's a lot of uncomfort. A lot of people are frustrated. A lot of people are successful. But where we are in the space, that's just where we are. It's going to take time before we start to see this industry level out.
Yeah, agreed. Another thing I wanted to speak on, just from our conversations before we hopped on, you're really passionate about social equity and access for Black and brown people to get into the space and not only get here,
Yep.
but stay here, right? It's one thing to give a Black person a license to meet a quota or a diversity mix, but if they're not equipped to sustain their business, you did a disservice to them and to Black people at large.
100%.
So what are some of the tools that you think the industry needs to equip Black founders with to keep them in the space and make sure they're actually profitable?
Yeah, again, another great question. I think I think a lot of it has to do with any other business. You need to understand how to operate a business, right? You need to understand the fundamentals. Where I work, we've had great leadership in implementing some of those KPIs and other foundational systems that are needed to scale. But I think a lot of these founders that are coming to the space, it's glorious to think you're starting your own company, but don't necessarily have um, the business acumen or the understanding on how to do it. So we just found that in our network, and I'm not shy to build my network, and I find or we found that a lot of people in our network have the ability to help Black and brown and Asian communities, to help equip them with the knowledge, and support them through that, whether it's creative and getting their brand assets together, or financial understanding, or again, structure, um, you know, brand strategy, operation, sales, marketing, all of that stuff. We have a very vast network of people that can support that, right? So yeah, I think that's just where we're positioned. I think those we need to equip these people that have been marginalized with the same abilities as those that have been running businesses for forever, right? And when you look at the historical oppression in those communities, the education is lacking. So what we've done is we've aligned the right people to provide that knowledge to support them to grow. Again, that's the reason we decided to put all our money together and create this fund to help support them financially as well. So just bringing all those pieces together, education. I'm not happy with some of these programs. I don't think we have a social problem. I think we have a financial problem. So social equity to me it's funny. Like I get what, and like anything new, right? It's about reshaping, rebuilding, and constantly looking and adjusting. But I think it's a financial concern. So that's why we created this fund, to be able to help and support those that need financial help. And then, again, with the network, being able to provide the education from growing a business standpoint.
No, very much so. I love it. And I would love to have you expound a little bit more on just kind of what's Align's plans in the short term, maybe for the rest of 2021 for our viewers. Like, what can they expect you guys to continue to develop towards?
Oh, a lot of tech. I mean, we find that this industry is moving towards tech. If you look at 2020, right, there was a huge pivot. MJ Unpacked was one of the first, if not the first, in the cannabis space to pivot to a virtual trade show, right, and just showing the need, or at least the ability to pivot into a tech world within the cannabis space. So we're looking at tech, agricultural technology, fintech, all these different technologies that we can leverage into the cannabis space. So we'll be focusing a lot on technology, and helping cannabis brands, for people that again have been marginalized, to give them some support as well. And that's kind of the focus for 2021. Provide education, provide good hardware and technology, and provide some good advice and strategic partnerships.
Okay, great. And also, I know you're in Canada, that's where you operate out of, but you seem like you follow the industry pretty closely. How do you feel about America kind of inching towards federal legalization? Are you excited about that? Do you think they're positioned to make some of the same mistakes that Canada made, or do you feel like, it's going to be overall a net positive for the industry?
Wow. I mean, I think it depends on what side of the room you're sitting on when answering that question, or being positioned to answer that question. I think it's going to be a yin and yang. I think federal legalization will be great for operators that have positioned themselves well and just need that fine tuning that federal legalization will provide, access to banking, being able to cross state lines. But when you look at some of the larger companies that have been in the space with the capital, with the experience, being able to, create companies with those restrictions in place, when those restrictions are removed, they're going to be well positioned to kind of capitalize on all the different areas they had to kind of grow their verticals in each state. So MSOs are going to, somewhat have a field day. But I think some of the single state operators may find it a little challenging to compete with those larger conglomerates that kind of have the ability to bounce between states much more easily than those single state operators to grow and expand into an MSO. So I think federal legalization will do a few companies some good, but I think the struggle will be, as history will show, the struggle will be for the underdogs to kind of get themselves and compete with those larger guys. But I think overall federal legalization is needed so that we can expand on the research and give more focus and consideration to the people that matter, which is the consumers.
Yeah, 100%, bro. I mean, I could walk you into a room and just have you speak for me because I agree with your point entirely. I'm actually really interested just to see what the price of flower does, once, a Curaleaf or a Cresco is able to just flood every state with product. I think we're going to see the price bottom out on flower for a little while. But moving on, though, a question, and you don't have to.
You know what? I think that's interesting because, when you look at some of these traditional growers, people that have been in this industry for so long, it's a gift, it's a talent, the knowledge that they've amassed over the years. You can't compete with that with money. So yeah, you're right. You're going to have these large companies that are going to be throwing in product, here and there, and the prices will be great. But the craft industry, those micro businesses, I think there's definitely going to be room for those guys, because it's boutique, right? You're going to have a much more curated product than that's just being pushed into the market at a mass scale. Sorry, I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I agree. It's like do you want to get the $1 bottle of Old English, or do you want to get some craft beer? I think that is
right.
going to shift towards that. But I'm saying initially, though, I think to your point, Curaleaf and Cresco and all of these huge operators, they're just gonna move weed everywhere for a while. But their quality, for the most part, does come in lower than the micro growers. But kind of moving on to something similar to that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to say a particular company. I actually don't want you to, because
I won't. I try my best to always remember not to. Everyone's in here trying to do well, regardless of what their support systems are, their backgrounds are. Everyone in business, for the most part, is trying to do good business. So I'll never knock someone for doing business. And I try my best to not mention any names. So we're good on that front. Yeah.
Right. But my question is, people ask me often, like, man, I got some money, I want to invest in cannabis stocks. What's going to be, the Apple of cannabis or the Amazon of cannabis? And we're not going to say particular companies to invest in, because this is not financial advice. But what, for the viewer who may do their research looking for a cannabis company to put their investment money into, what are some of the things you should look for in a large operator to kind of give you an idea that they're going to be around for a while? Because you've seen the best fall under in Canada, so I'm sure you kind of have an idea.
Yeah, I've watched some. I've seen some ups and downs for sure. I think, like anything, the best companies to focus on in cannabis are the companies that focus on you, the consumer, right? If nothing about their branding is pointed at the consumer, taking into consideration what the consumer wants, what they think, I think that's, I don't want to say problematic, but that in itself, right? Like if you go to a store and it doesn't have anything that's pointed at you, do you need to be in that store, right? So I think looking for the guys that care, and that are growing strategically, partnering strategically, have a reputation for good products, do your research. We live in the world of Internet of Things, and all the information is out there. It's just a matter of Googling. or querying whatever it is you're looking for. I mean, there's a ton in Canada, in America. There are a ton of phenomenal operators. I know a large amount of them, south of the border, north of the border. There are a lot out there, and it's really preference. Just do your due diligence. Don't necessarily follow the hype, but do your due diligence and see if it makes sense and aligns with you, right? That's what's most important.
Okay, great, man. Look, this was one of my favorite conversations. I
Thank
know our
you.
viewers are going to enjoy this because, for the most part, the questions I asked you are the ones that I get asked the most in the comments or personally.
Okay.
It's really about how do I raise capital, or if I have capital, how do I turn that into more capital? And I think you expounded on both of those questions well. But I'd love for you to leave our viewers with where they can find you on maybe say a LinkedIn or social media or your company, just in case they have any questions or want to reach out to you directly.
Yeah, I mean, you can always reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Onell Crawford on LinkedIn. I believe on Instagram, it's Onell from Green Tank. Feel free to reach out to me there. For those that are, I definitely love to plug this. For those that are looking to get into the company and are looking for partnerships, anyone can find a vendor, right? And I like to look at this industry like if all you're looking for is product, all you're looking for is a vending machine, right? And you'll get what you pay for. So you put your $1.25 and hit that B1 button, that's what you're going to get. But I don't really focus on that. I like long-term relationships, ones that you can depend on and trust. And we provide partnerships. Everything that's about me is partnerships and relationships. So Green Tank, same thing when it comes to vape hardware. We do all of our due diligence to ensure that the consumer has the best product in that category. And anything creative and financial, again, it's about partnership and alignment. And I'm able to provide that service or point individuals looking to get into the space into that direction to help with creative, company structure, as well as point them into the right financial direction as well.
Hey man, you're a poet, true poet, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your information and your knowledge. It's funny because it's like, it takes us 10 years of doing stuff wrong to be able to quantify it to people and tell them just in a 30-minute conversation. So I really appreciate you offering your perspective, bro. And I definitely wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate. Hey, listen, I'm still learning, right? I'm a student of life, so I'm always learning, and that's why I love building my network because my LinkedIn network is comprised of some of the most brilliant minds in the space, and that's what I like. I love surrounding myself with people that are smarter than me. That's the point. That's how you grow. But I'm happy to leverage that or to provide access to those individuals in my network or networks that can help to grow and support individuals coming into the space. So I thank you very much, as well as Black Enterprise Magazine for having me here. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate that.